We're going to get right into the good stuff here, but first just some super quick definitions about what CD or continuous deployment or continuous delivery actually is. So this is one of those terms where there isn't really a definitive definition that everybody agrees on, but these are the definitions that I'm going to be using. So one definition for CD is continuous delivery. And I would describe this as an automated release process that will allow easily deploying new code changes live to a testing or production environment. So we want to take code that we've sent up to our GitHub repo, and we want to have that be run somewhere where we can actually use it. Now, as well as continuous delivery, there is also continuous deployment, which is basically the same thing, but with delivery, there is usually going to be some kind of manual review step involved. We might first deploy to some kind of staging environment, check that everything's all good, and then we'll manually approve a release of our code for public consumption. Continuous deployment, on the other hand, doesn't have that manual review step. So anything that passes through our continuous integration pipeline is going to be immediately deployed to live users. So we're going to look at how we can easily set up either of these processes with Netlify. So as with everything we've been doing in this series, this is actually the third part of a series more broadly on DevOps, project management, continuous integration, and so on. We are sort of looking at a simple bare bones process of getting this stuff up and running and benefiting from it. There is, of course, way more advanced things you can do. We can even include continuous delivery and deployment steps into our GitHub action pipelines. But the reason I've chosen Netlify for this tutorial is that it is just super simple to set up. It's mostly just a matter of pointing Netlify at your repo and you're good to go. So far we have a GitHub repo set up with some GitHub actions to run CI builds that automatically run our tests. So if you want to catch up to this point, I'll link to the entire series in the description, but you can also just consume this tutorial by itself. You don't need all the additional CI and project management stuff that I'll be talking about. And it is worth noting that I will also be releasing a full article for this tutorial as well. So if you want to read a bit more about CD and just the concepts we're talking about in a bit more depth, I will link to that in the description when it is ready as well. Okay, so now let's get right into building this CD process with Netlify. So we have our PM tutorial GitHub repo here that we've been working with. So this is where we have that CI process set up currently. So what we're going to do is go over to Netlify, and of course you're going to need a Netlify account. You'll be able to do most of these with a free account, I believe, at least currently. But there is one step we'll talk about where you can set a password on your Netlify site. So if you're not quite ready to display code live to users, you might want to set a password to stop people from accessing that. So if you do want to do that, I think you do need a paid account. Okay, so what we're going to do is say new site from Git from within our Netlify account, and then we're going to choose GitHub in our case to link it to our repo. So I've just searched for my PM tutorial repo and I'm going to select that. And now you're going to choose which branch to deploy. Now with the process we're setting up, we're just using the main branch, but this is also a place where you could make some modifications to this process. If you did have some kind of process where you have different branches like an integration or staging branch, you might want to change things up a bit here to suit your process. But for our purposes, we're going to just deploy directly from main. And even if we are just doing the delivery process where we still want that manual review step, we will still set this to deploy from the main branch. Now we're going to need to add our build command. Now, since this is an Angular application, our build command is going to be ng build prod. So when Netlify is grabbing the app from our repository, it knows how to build the application. And it also needs to know where that built code is output. So for our Ionic Angular application, that is output to the www folder. So Netlify can build the application, and it knows that the result of that build is going to live within that www folder, and that's what is actually going to be deployed and hosted on the internet. So now we're going to deploy the site, and one thing to take note of here is that it's going to take whatever is currently in our repo, and it is going to build that and deploy it live. So in the next step, we will look at setting up a password on the site. Again, if you have a paid Netlify account, you'll be able to set a password so people can't access the site if you don't want them to yet. But if you don't already have some production code that you want to go to production with now, you might want to leave this step till later when you have something you actually want to deploy. But this is also good to use throughout the development process. Again, you might want to put the password on the site so people can't actually access it, but having some kind of continuous delivery process is useful for getting feedback from clients or whoever we need to get feedback from. Okay, so we're going to deploy the site. And as you can see here, it says it's starting up. It's just going to go through building and processing and hosting that www folder. But whilst this is happening, if we do want to set up that password, what we can do is go into site settings, go down to access control, and then we can click the set password button. Now I'm just going to type in a password here and then click save. And now nobody will be able to access this website unless they have that password. When they go to the address, it's going to prompt them to put in the password. If they know it, they can view the site. If they don't know it, then they can't. So we're just going to wait for this build process to finish, and then we'll pick up from there. Okay, so that deploy has finished now. So we will be able to access our application at this address here. So I'm just going to click on that to open it. We get that password challenge that we set up. And now we can see our Ionic app. So this is great that we have this all working now, but we still have some more to discuss about our process. And one problem with the application right now is that by default on Netlify, it's going to treat this like a normal website, not a single page application. So this first load worked fine, but you can see that we have our routing set up, and that is pointing us to /home. So if I try to refresh this, we get an error. And that is because Netlify is trying to grab an actual home folder from the server. So it thinks, maybe we have some structure set up where we've got /home/index.html, and it's trying to grab that, but that doesn't exist because this is a single page application and everything is routed through the index.html file. So we need to fix this. This doesn't have anything really to do with our CD process specifically, but this is going to be a good opportunity to fix this bug and show how the entire CI/CD process works. And we're going to see what it looks like with that manual review step before we actually deploy, and also how we might do that if we didn't want that manual step. So what we're going to do is go into our Netlify site here, and we're going to go over to the deploy section, and this is the main key to setting up this CD process. So what we're going to do is say stop auto publishing. So we're just going to click that, and now we have a continuous delivery process set up. What we just had before this was really a continuous deployment setup. It took whatever was pushed to our main branch and it deployed it automatically. But by turning off this auto publishing, what's going to happen is that Netlify will still build our site, and we can see a preview of that built site, but we need to actually manually choose to publish it to make it available to people. So this deploy here is already published, but basically what we would do is click into the deploy that's not yet published, and there'll be an option here to publish it. So what we're going to do now is go through that whole process to fix up our Netlify problem. We will review the change before it goes live, and then we'll manually publish that. So since this is a part of the broader project management DevOps series, I'm actually going to go through this entire Git workflow that we talked about in a previous tutorial, where we set up our sort of project management features, create issues, create branches. I'm going to go through all of this as an example. But if you're not interested in all this project management stuff, the tutorial is just about done for you here. Anyway, we've already discussed the key aspects of setting this up in Netlify. Maybe you can just jump to the end to see what it looks like to manually publish a deploy. But all of the steps that we're about to do are mostly related to this project management process. So what we're going to do, since we want to make a change to our Netlify site, what we need to do is create a netlify.toml file in the root of our project directory. And we're going to use that file to tell Netlify to route all of the traffic through the index.html file. So even though this is just a little sort of bug fix config change kind of change, we still need to create an issue for it. So I'm going to come into my issues, create new issue, and we'll just say add netlify.toml file to route traffic through index.html. And now we can come over to the project section and we can manually set that to our Kanban board. But we did set up a GitHub action to automatically do that for us if we forgot. But by doing it manually ourselves here, it is going to instantly go to that project rather than having to wait for our GitHub action to run. And just for fun, actually, I will just not set that project and we will watch our action run and automatically put it there for us. So I'll submit this new issue and let's jump over into the actions tab and we can see that that action is running and it's going to add that issue to the project for us. So if we go to the project now, we might not see it initially, but we should see it pop in here in just a moment. And there we go, it's just popped in now. So typically we would then pull this over into the test card in our Kanban board, but we're not actually going to write a test for this. The only place where this problem actually occurs is when it's deployed to Netlify itself, when it's hosted on Netlify. So there isn't really a way that we can test this in our local or our CI tests. So what I'm going to do is drag it straight over to the code section and we're going to add the file that we need. Okay, so now we're up to the actual coding step. So we're going to go through the full process. So we'll first check out the main branch. And this is the main branch for our repository. So yours might not be called main, it might be called master or something else. And we're going to run git pull. The basic idea here is that we just want to make sure we have the latest code in our local repository here. And then we're going to create a new branch using the issue number that was just created. So we're going to say git checkout-b, and I'm going to use a format of my initials, so jm-14. So now that we're on that new branch, we can actually add the code necessary. So what we need to do in our project itself is create a new file at the root of the project, and this is going to be called netlify.toml. And this is the syntax we will need to use to set up that redirect. So we're redirecting all traffic to index.html. So now that we have that code added, we can look at pushing it back and merging it back into our main branch. And I'm going to be a little bit naughty here and not actually run our tests locally. That is definitely something that we should do before we go pushing new code. But the whole point of our CI process is that it's in place to help us catch things that we've missed. So in the case where a developer did forget to run their test locally and just push straight up to the repository, it's sort of like a safety net there to catch us when we mess up. So what I'm going to do is just add this back immediately. So we'll have a look to see that our change is there with git status. We can see we have that new netlify.toml file. And then we're going to run git add all, git commit -m, and we're going to use the closes syntax to automatically close that issue for us. So if we say closes number 14, and I'll just say added index.html redirect. So that's automatically going to close the issue for us in GitHub, and it's going to move it over to our done card. And then we'll just run git push. And since this is our first push, we actually need to set the upstream first, so it knows where to push that to in the remote repository. So we'll run git push set upstream origin jm-14. So if we come back to our project now, this won't actually be closed if I give this a refresh because it hasn't been merged into the main branch yet. So that's what we are going to do now. So to merge into the main branch, we are first going to check out the main branch. And again, we're going to run git pull to make sure we have the latest code. Then we're going to go back to our feature branch again, or our task branch. So we're going to check out jm14 again, and then we are going to rebase it. So we'll say git rebase main. So that's going to basically take main and then apply our changes back on top of the main branch. Now in this case, there aren't actually any changes from main that need to be accounted for, so that's fine. And again, if you do want more explanation of what's going on here, I would recommend going back to the first tutorial in this series where I explain this all in a bit more depth. And now that our branch has been rebased, we're going to again check out main. We're going to merge in the branch that we have created by running git merge jm-14. And then we are going to push that back up to our repository. So now that that has been merged, our issue should be closed and moved over to the done card. We can see here it's already been moved over to done automatically, but if I refresh this, we can also see that it's being closed as well. So since some new code has been pushed into our main branch, Netlify is going to know about that and it's going to start that deployment process. So let's jump back over to our Netlify site and you can see here that it is currently building. But it's worth noting here that it says auto publishing is off. So it will build this right now, but it's not going to publish it. So the published version is going to stay on what it was originally. Another thing we can quickly look at is that our CI builds will be currently running at the moment. So this is running our tests that we forgot to run locally. So that's going to run and finish, and it has just finished now, and it is all passed fine. We have that check mark there. So let's just go back to Netlify, and it looks like this build now has also finished. So what we can do now is, since we're doing this continuous delivery process where we have this manual review step, what we can do is click on the deploy that we are interested in, and then we can click on this preview button. So that's going to open up our site for us. And if you notice, the address here actually has some extra stuff in front of our URL. So this isn't the live published URL. This is a preview of this specific deploy, which we have not made live yet. So I'll enter in the password and we can see our Ionic application again. Now this time we have our Netlify configuration file. So hopefully if we refresh, we can see that it actually loads correctly. So now that we have all traffic being routed through the index.html file, it's not thinking that this is a folder that it needs to look up. It knows that it's just a route that is going to be handled by index.html. So we verified that our little fix there worked. It's generally what you'll want to do before you deploy. Come in here, have a quick look to see if everything looks normal, but we don't want to rely on developers or anybody having to manually go and test everything at the live site. The main thing we want to rely on is our tests, our automated tests that are run in our CI build. So before we go ahead and publish this specific deploy, we want to make sure that we check that the CI builds have passed. So we can do that just by clicking on this main @ link here to see the repository. And we can see that we have this little check mark up in the top left here. And if we click that, we can see that all checks have passed successfully. So it's important that we check that first, check that all of our automated tests have actually passed. Give it a once over by looking at the preview, and then we can just click publish deploy. So now if we go back to the main dashboard here, we can see that the published version is now this new one that we pushed. So if we go to our live URL and we will give that a refresh to check the routing problem, and we can see that that is working fine now. So we've gone through our entire CI/CD process to get this change deployed, and it is now live. So this is an easy little CD process to set up, as you can just point it at whatever branch you want to deploy from, and it sets up a simple little manual review process for us before the site goes live. And if you wanted to take more of a continuous deployment approach rather than a continuous delivery approach, you could just turn the auto publishing back on and have anything that is pushed to your main or production branch deployed automatically with no manual review step. So the process that we have set up is a simple one and lacks some of the advanced governance features that adds robustness to this process. So there is still room in this process for developer error. It does rely on us manually clicking that preview link and manually checking that the CI builds have actually passed. But it would be quite easy just for someone to come in here and just publish a new deploy without checking anything. But everything we've done up until this point in this video and in previous videos and articles is relatively simple to set up, and it gets you a lot of the benefits of this sort of formal CI/CD process without having to do a lot of legwork up front to get this all set up. And for simple teams with simple requirements, this is probably going to be more than enough in a lot of cases. So if it's not up already, I will be publishing an article on Elite Ionic that covers this continuous delivery, continuous deployment concept in more depth. So I'll link to that in the description when it is available. And if you like this video, do feel free to leave a like and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one.